Hi, listener. This is From Ideology to Unity, a spiritual journey where we let go of ego and ideological doctrine in favor of meaning, purpose, and unity as a whole. I'm here with Trisha Schinkel. She's an awakening life coach. She does Reiki sessions and meditation classes. She has a podcast called Inner Buddha's Zen Entrepreneur, which I really recommend. And you can check her site out, which is www.innerbuddha.ca. Hi, Trisha. How are you doing?
Hi there. Thank you so much for having me on, Nick.
It's a pleasure. So, will thriving and flourishing be the new normal?
That is the intention. Absolutely. I find even myself I've always had a hard time allowing the thrive and the flourish to happen. I find when I get to that point and there's something inside of me that shuts down right away because it's afraid because I've never allowed myself to be there before.
Right. So, it's honestly, it sounds a lot more positive than the other new normal we've been told about.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the goal, right? That's where we're headed. You may or may not know that, but everything that has been getting in the way is falling off and collapsing so that we can build those new foundations for this better new world.
Yeah, well, I'm inclined to agree with you. Yeah, that sounds pretty good.
Hmm.
So, important thing for you that you've mentioned is that we need to be familiar with our darkness and our light and to find a balance. So,
Hmm.
could you elaborate on that?
Well, I myself have all for as long as I can remember, have always suffered with anxiety and depression. That was my story. And I lived in that darkness for a very long time. There was moments where I would peak get peaks of happiness and joy, so I knew that it was possible, but I didn't really learn how to be any other way because my environment that I came into when I was growing up taught me that pain and suffering was how you got to where you needed to be.
Could you tell me?
And there,
Sorry, go on.
So no, and I could let you know is that there was something inside of me, even when I was a young child. I knew that was a lie, and there was something bigger inside me that needed to come out, and it slowly took its time to come out, but it has now finally been brought to light.
So it's like a flower blossoming,
Absolutely,
a flower
yeah,
of
and
light.
you can't rush a flower either. And I noticed there was times in my life where I could see where I was going and I wanted to get there so badly, but I felt like I was being pulled back because there was something there that I had to learn before I was able to move forward, before that flower could bloom.
Yeah. So, what in your experience taught you that pain and suffering was the way to go?
Again, it was my childhood environment. I was raised with with my mom and dad. They came from a time where they had to work hard. We lived on the farm. We had no money ever. That was the story for a very long time, and they still have that mindset. But it was just a lot of fighting, a lot of pain and hurt, and that's all that I saw for a
Yeah.
very long time. And so that triggered in me, I I could feel the emotions, and at that time I didn't realize that I was an empath. That everything around me I was sucking up like a sponge or a vacuum, right? It was just this part of me that was taking on everything and I didn't know how to channel it out. So
Right.
I would sit with it and feel it. And then that's where the anxiety built from and the panic attacks and everything else that kind of resulted from that.
Right. And you mentioned that you're an empath. So,
Mhm.
how would you define that then?
An empath is a soul that decided to incarnate in this body to help and channel energies from other souls, other beings, right? So an empath is somebody who is here as a conduit to clean up what's around me, right? It's almost like I'm that vacuum. When I'm around other people, I'm taking in their energies, the ones that are holding them back, making them, feel the heaviness of life. And I have this medicine inside me that I share with people, which later I then started to channel into Reiki. But I would say the empath side is meant to take on that energy, but then channel it into the earth for it to be recycled. And a lot of empaths I find don't even realize that. They just keep taking it on without knowing what to do with it, right?
Oh.
And that's how I get a lot of my messages. That's how I communicate without communicating, right? Reading energy and understanding energy, understanding emotion, understanding what's behind that. And that's the thing, is that all these hard times in my life, they kept coming up and coming up for me to realize that. And it wasn't until I got to this place in my life where I realized that I'm supposed to feel this so that I can understand how to help this person and I can help them through these emotions, right? And then I had to learn how to cloak myself so that
Right.
I then don't soak up things unintentionally, which is interesting because I always tended to work in large offices, and I've always been attracted to big corporations, big companies, right? And that's the majority of my work experience has been, is in these large environments, because without me even realizing it, I was there to help those around me through their pain, through their suffering, and help them understand it in a different way.
Was that your higher self guiding you to do that?
I would absolutely agree. Yes, that was my higher self. At the time, I had no idea. And it wasn't really until I would say 2016 when I got to the point where I was like, I don't want to have anything to do with this anymore. I'm done feeling this way. I am done. Like, this was it. And then I made things change. I started to choose differently. And that's what led me down this very spiritual path, which is interesting because coming from a very religious family, a very large family, I'm a baby of 5. I'm the so I have 4 brothers and sisters, right? And having that religious background, I was afraid to step into my spirituality. I was afraid to even claim my spirituality because, of course, it's unholy and all these other opinions that religions put
Okay.
on spirituality.
So how do you deal with the idea of what if this is a trick from Satan, and that's those sort of emotions? Because like for someone brought up with that
Mhm.
must feel like a very real thing, right?
Absolutely. I could tell the difference. It's through the vibration, through the frequency that I'm feeling and I'm channeling through my body, right? Because my body responds to frequency and emotions and vibrations. And if I can sense that something is a little bit higher vibration, then I know it's good. And I also learn to communicate with my body, right? So using my body as a tool, almost to, before I learned how to use my intuition, I used my body, right? Knowing that if something is good for me, I'll move towards it. If it's something that is, a low frequency or something that's going to harm me, I naturally would step away. So it's just a learning of how to communicate through the senses of my body.
Okay.
It's a tool.
It does sound like a gift in a sense that you automatically walk away from low vibes, because some people they walk towards it without
For a
necessarily
long
realizing.
time, I did, because from leaving the religion, and the religion was Jehovah's Witness.
Oh, yeah, that's quite a
So
yeah.
that might kind of give you some kind of perspective of where my upbringing was up until age 12. 12 is when I walked away. And at that point, I then went to a lot of drugs, a lot of alcohol. I went to a lot of parties. I just I was hurting and I needed to numb. And I did that until about age 21. So from ages 12 to 21, that entire part of my life was me living in my internal darkness and not even realizing it.
That, I mean, to be living in the darkness from that age, that is unpleasant. But perhaps, at least if you start early to explore the darkness, you can come out to the light of the other side earlier too.
I did find that once I decided, I had to make the choice for myself. And what you really need to know is that free will is a real thing and it is a law of the universe, right? So, and another thing I've realized too is that nothing I did was really wrong. It was a way of learning. It was a way of understanding what it is like to be human, right? There's that escapism, that part of me that wanted to escape, that wanted to run away, but my soul always called me back. There was always this part of me that was calling me back, bringing me back into this place, right? And until I was ready, I guess you could say, is when things actually started really changing for me.
What led to it changing then?
Sorry?
What led to those changes?
It basically got to the point where I just didn't want to suffer anymore. I was done with it. I was like, okay, you know what? I've suffered since 12 years old. I was, 25 or so when I decided that I needed to get off my medication. I was on the highest dose I could possibly be on and of antidepressants. And I looked at what I was doing, and I had at the time, my son was 5. And I was in a really bad place with my husband. We were fighting all the time. Things were just falling apart, right? So it was either I leave the relationship or I then build myself within the relationship. And for the sake of my son, I couldn't do it. I had to stay and I had to play it out. And I realized that on that day, on when I said I do, and I married him, I realized that I made a choice. This was what I chose. So I had to find out, why did I choose this? Why did I choose this suffering? What caused me to go so far and so deep into this pit of despair? What was the purpose there? And that is what really started my journey. I had to find answers. I was looking, and I am still looking. But at least now I don't have to look as hard.
That's powerful. Like,
It
really,
is.
yeah.
And in that moment, I have to admit, that's when I realized that there is such a thing as past lives, because there was a moment in between me and my husband where I realized that we were in this position before.
Him as
Even
well.
though, oh yes, absolutely. It not in this lifetime, but in past lifetimes. Like, it was just this moment of realization and this intuitive hit. I'm like, we've been here before. Like, why are we back here? But then I realized in this physical lifetime that we're living now, this has never happened before. We were not in a place, you know what I mean? So it didn't make any sense, but it made all sense for me, because then I could relate it to what had happened in previous lifetimes. The only difference is that this lifetime, I chose something different. I chose to stay. And I chose to see it through. And now it's been 5 years since that big day, and we are stronger than ever. We've grown together in ways that I never thought was possible, and we have experienced true love in ways that you only hear about in fairy tales. So,
right. And it takes the catalyst of going into the darkness, and I suppose you could say it's shadow work or inner work, right?
Shadow work, dark night of the soul. There's so many terms and names for it. It's healing. That's what it is. What all comes back down to is that I'm shedding layers from past lives that I've carried forward, the karma that I've brought forward from past lives. This is the lifetime now where we are healing old wounds. This is the lifetime that you're cutting ties with everything that you have created in past lifetimes and that
Right.
you're trying to make up for, right?
So is it more intense? So it's more difficult, more negativity. But if you get through that, then suddenly it amazingly, it all just be
It
burst
all comes
forth, right?
together. Yeah, it comes together. Yeah.
So, and this is a key theme of the healing that you do. So you've been through it and you help other people go through this.
I mean, they don't have to go through the same situations.
Right, of course.
It's the intensity of the pain that you feel. I know that pain. I know that suffering because I've caused that to myself time and time again. But it's only because I've caused that pain within myself that now I can help those who are feeling that heal from it in a faster way. I'm that person that I wish I had when I was in those positions.
You know, that makes me wonder if my part of my purpose is helping people deal with ideology and these sort of
Mhm.
these value structures or belief systems we attach to, right? Have I been doing this in past lifetimes as well? All
You may
this
not have been doing this
ideology?
exact thing, but you may have been a philosopher. You may have been a teacher. You may have been
No,
a
I mean more in a
seeker of
negative way. Have
knowledge.
I been
We have been all things.
problematic and causing problems in that kind of way?
Absolutely.
And now I'm dealing with the karma of it. And now I'm helping people
Absolutely.
heal with that.
But you had to bring it forward so that you could learn the lessons that you did not learn in the past lifetimes.
Right.
Now we're getting into a whole nother way. Yeah.
You know what? Let's go into it. Let's do it.
Okay, let's do it.
Past lives and these patterns that repeat themselves.
It's interesting because I actually just went for a past life regression last Friday. And
Okay.
I got to see probably about 10 lifetimes that I had. And going into those lifetimes, I've noticed that I was always building something. I was always, I was always a part of something bigger. And there was always a lot of love, a lot of connection. And that is what a lot of the times past life regressions, people are afraid of them because religion teaches you that past lives are not true, or that's the work of the devil, or whatever you want to call it. But there is so much to be learned and so much healing to be halved in just tapping into that knowledge that you've learned. I actually asked, in going into my past life regression, I wanted to bring back the knowledge that I had when I was in Atlantis. I wanted to touch base with the lifetime that I was a shaman. I wanted to get the knowledge that I had when I was a Buddhist monk in Tibet. These are all lifetimes that I've had glimpses of before my regression even happened.
So these weren't just the last 10. These are 10 particular ones among many.
Among many thousands of lifetimes.
Yeah.
Think about how old Earth is, right? And we're tied to Earth with the karma that we've created. We have to keep coming back because every time we leave, we look at what we've done and we're like, oh, I have to make up for that. That was that was a hard time in my life. And I was really hard on those people. So you come back into this incarnation.
It depends how long you've been here, though. I mean, some people, it's their first time because they're wondering.
That's true.
Right? Some people, I wonder, are there star seeds who have been here for several lifetimes?
I have been. There are the 4 waves that are coming in now that have not been here. Some people have only been with God their entire existence, entire being.
Oh,
and
so they're like new
souls that cannot handle the density that, like, being on Earth is a heavy experience. Physical bodies and physical realities is hard. And if you look at it, you were asked, do you want to be a part of this awakening? Do you want to be a part of raising the Earth's vibration to get that to the next level, to get us to that 5D place, right? These souls, they could have been from different planets, different constellations, from different universes, different times. They all come here. These are these star seeds, these light workers, these warriors bringing in and ushering in this new world. And
Right.
that's what we're in right now, which is really, really exciting.
There's also, though, the what are they called? The Indigo Children.
Mm-hmm. They are very beautiful beings, and they're I don't know what planet they're from. It's a water planet. I know that.
Oh, I thought they were like just okay. What's the word for people who awaken on Earth, have already awakened on Earth, and are coming back to help? Is that something else? Sorry, you
I would consider them light workers,
right.
because that's the thing. Like for myself, I am a light worker. I work with the light. Reiki is very much working with the light, right?
You were
That's
talking about
channeling it.
an aquatic world. Is it one of these alien races that's well known, or among
Like Palladians, Arcturians, or
I
things
don't
like
think it
that,
was
you
those
mean?
two. I think it was Syrians, maybe.
Sirius, yeah.
Hmm.
Sirius, I believe that was the water planet.
Yeah, I
But I
think so.
think it doesn't exist anymore. I think it was blown up, from what I remember.
What stuff about
That's
the
the
Orion
thing.
Wars or something?
Sorry?
I don't know. Anyway, so we might get back to that later, but you were talking about the patterns over many lifetimes that people
Mhm.
often keep repeating.
So that's just it. When you come to a point of passing away and you go into reviewing your life, right? You have the option, you get to choose every time if you're going to come back and incarnate again on Earth, or if you're going to incarnate somewhere else, right? You get to choose. A lot of the times, because of what has been transpired with different circles of friends, different circles of family, you look at them, you get to see your life through their perspective, because you've seen your life through your perspective your entire life, right? But you don't know the effects that you had on those people. So you get to see how they felt when you said a certain thing or done a certain thing. So if you
Oh
feel
man.
bad, I know. See, that's what the thing is that karma, you look at that, you see what you've done to them, and you see the hurt that you've inflicted, and you're like, no, I have to go back and I have to make this right. Right. So that's what perpetuates the karma. And then you get in your contract, you get to write out. Now, of course, for with free will, you don't always get the opportunities. They have to also agree to it as well. Right. So it's more or less you get put in situations where these things can happen again. Right. The same kind of story plays out. And then it's about you choosing. Just like when I had I was in a position where if I was going to leave my husband or not, in one lifetime, I did. This lifetime, I didn't. And now I get to see and if I did, I would never have had my daughter. That blows my mind.
Yeah. Although some of our mistakes, you can't look back at our mistakes and just
But nothing's
beat
really a
ourselves up over it. Because
mistake
the so-called mistakes often can
because
actually
you've
be
learned
the very
something.
things that lead us to grow. So yeah.
Exactly. See, there's no such thing as right and wrong, right? What there really is just the easy road or the hard road. So when you are on the hard road, you consider yourself making a big failure or mistake because things aren't going the way you want. You're just taking the longer way. You're just actually enhancing your abilities to have that human experience in more of a depth space, right?
Right. Although you have challenged the idea that suffering is the only way to learn and grow.
That is one of the ways. Absolutely. I feel that it is a part of our human experience, and
What's
it
the other
has
way?
been.
What other ways are there?
I don't really know. That's the thing.
I mean, there's a path of
All I really know
easy.
is the suffering.
I mean, some souls maybe they always go the easy way, but maybe they
So
don't
what
learn
is
as
the
much
easy way?
following the flow, the way, right?
So they get to pick. That's the thing, though. You get to pick the type of life that you're going to be born into. You get to pick the people that you're going to be involved with. So there are lifetimes where you did pick the easy path, and everything was handed to you, and kings, queens, and things like that. Or
I don't mean easy in that way. I don't mean easy because is it necessarily easy to be wealthy? Sometimes that's like a
Not
curse.
necessarily. No,
I meant more like,
exactly.
in a way, being born in a lifetime when you're a Buddhist monk is easy because you're actually following the true harmony more, and you're not going through the suffering of being disharmonious.
But how do you get to that place of enlightenment?
That's a good point.
Right? Because you have to know the polarity. We live in a universe of polarity and contrast. We agreed to that coming in because it's only through the contrast where we can actually learn what we actually want in life, right? We can, a lot of people, I find when I'm working with people, I can ask them, I'm like, what is it that you want out of life? Where do you want to be? What do you want to get out of it? And they don't know. I say, well, I want to be happy. Okay, so what does that look like? What does that feel like? Right? They don't know because they can list off everything that they don't want, everything that's been happening that, you know what I mean? Like it's so
Yeah.
easy because that's our human nature. So that's why I even my last podcast that I released was, do you allow yourself to thrive and flourish? Because you're so wrapped up in the suffering, you forget that you can just step off at any time. It's like holding that hot coal and be like, not realizing, how do I let this go? How do I put this down? I don't know. I have never put it down my entire life, right? Like you're
Yeah.
hurting yourself without, and all you have to do is open your hands and let it go.
But that's not as easy as it sounds for people so stuck in that dense energy, that
You
negativity,
know
right?
why? Because they're so zoomed in. It's like you got to zoom out.
Perspective, right?
Right. Because you once you're in there, that's all you can see. That's all that you can feel. That's all you can
Right. So you got this
experience.
tunnel vision and you're feeling this big
Yes.
hands. You're like, why are my
Take the
hands hurting?
blinders off,
Why are they
right?
hurting? And you get this bit of perspective like, oh, right. Okay. I'm
Yeah.
holding hot coals.
Oh, right. Put it down. Yeah. But that's the thing. And until you're shown, these are things that you are not taught when we are children. These are things that you have to learn. These are things that I now am teaching my own children because I know the value in them, is taking a step back and looking at the bigger perspective. What is this actually doing for my own growth or the growth of those that are involved? That's the biggest thing. And all that matters is, are you learning? Are you moving? Are you evolving? Are you growing?
Yeah.
If you're not, then then walk away from it.
Then how do you know though? Because sometimes what seems like at the time to be just terrible for you turns out in a sort of paradoxical way to be
It is.
great for you, right?
It's designed that way so that you would, it's again that contrast, right? It's like Abraham Hicks, they always talk about launching the rockets of desire, right? You have to know the contrast, the worst part of it, so that you can clarify and get a better understanding of what it is that you actually want, so then you can
Right.
start moving in that direction. But until you figure that out, you're going to be stuck.
That's the nature of polarity.
Yes.
And there's not just one polarity. The one we regularly think of as good or bad or light and dark,
Hmm.
right? But I suppose there's others. And this is what we're here to learn about. But we're also, at this particular time, maybe we're here to learn about it and let it go.
This time in history is a time of letting go, of healing, releasing, learning our lessons, and then ushering in a better life for ourselves and everyone around us.
Okay. So a key theme for you is connecting to intuition and finding your life purpose. So
Mhm.
how do we do that?
It's quieting the mind. It starts by learning the voice of your intuition, because we've got two voices in our minds, and we've got the ego and we got our intuition, which our intuition is your soul. It's your higher self. It's that God part of you, that oneness, right? But the thing is about that spark, that oneness, is that it's very soft and very gentle. And sometimes it's really hard to hear. And if the ego is turned up, the volume is turned up really loud, you won't even hear it, right? So it's all about tuning into the frequency of that, like a radio channel, right? It's learning how to sense it. So for me, I am clairsentient, so I feel a lot, and I channel, right? So it's more or less getting to understand what is it, clairaudience, clairsentience, clairvoyance, like, what 5, 6 senses are you using?
Which
And
Claire am I then?
well, that's something that you would have to go through. I actually am teaching a class tomorrow about intuition class. Um,
Ah,
yeah, so it's getting to know yourself. And
yeah.
a lot of inner work is how you get there.
It's funny, everyone focuses so much on getting to know other people,
Mhm.
but sometimes that's the one person they're not getting to know is themselves.
That's it. Because we're afraid to. We're afraid to get to know ourselves because in a silly way, we think that we're unlovable or unworthy. So we act from that place and we make decisions from that place.
Right.
But that's not true. It never was. It was just programmed into our culture and into our society, into our religions, into our schools, and everything else that we've learned.
Okay, so let's talk about the programming. What's your perspective about that?
Programming, as in, you mean like,
Did it happen naturally, or was it a conspiracy, or something between? Something else?
I don't know what you mean by programming.
You're saying we are programmed to.
Oh, right, because it's just it's our ancestral stories coming down,
Right.
telling us this is the way it is, and this is the way it always has been. So therefore, it cannot be any other way. But we're coming in at a time where we're questioning everything. And years ago, not too long ago, you would be hung if you questioned something.
You
So
know, I,
that is where the programming started. It was the control. It was the hiding of, whoever was in charge didn't want to be found out.
right.
And now they are.
So those who were in charge who were breaking the rules didn't want to be found out, and those who weren't, that they had to just follow it, didn't have a choice. Generally.
Mhm. Just be on autopilot, right?
Yeah. So now we come to a situation where I wonder, it must be hard for social conservatives, because this society is it's so much more, it's just not following tradition in the same way.
Mm-mm.
And this reminds me of what I was talking about in a previous, in the From Darkness into Light episode that I did, where it has to do with the idea that there's different roles in an overall society that, I guess, you can say the right and the left, or conservatives, liberals, whatever you call it, have,
Mhm.
right? There's a sort of natural balance, right? But perhaps in moving past the past ways of doing things, we have to go more into the unknown, the darkness, and this chaos of not doing things how they have been done before. And then we
Disrupt
need,
the
yeah,
process.
and to
Mhm.
find something beyond that that's better than what we started with, and definitely better from the chaos. Because obviously, if you've got all this things you're used to, coping mechanisms, right?
Mhm.
But individually, you abandon the coping mechanisms, and suddenly you're like, what's going on? My life is like chaotic, right? And then you get new ways of doing things that might be better off than before. That on a collective level seems to be what we're going through as we're moving towards a new age. Right?
Mhm. It's about questioning. It's about discernment and making a decision for yourself and what things mean and the meanings that we give things, right? Because perception is huge, because that then forms your own reality. That then forms your experience in this matrix, right?
Matrix. Yeah, so it's a hologram, right?
It is.
So you believe it's a spiritual hologram rather than a computer, do you?
Absolutely. I mean, it could be a computer as well, but it's a very advanced computer, that's for sure.
The way I look at it is it doesn't really make much of a difference.
It isn't. It's the same thing, right?
Maybe that's a way we could get materialists on board. Just to say, okay, well, look at it this way. What if it's all a computer? What is it? What's the likelihood that it's all a computer, or that this is not a simulation in a computer? And if it's sufficiently advanced AI, would you know the difference? That's the materialist explanation for living in hologram, right? And it makes me think maybe that's something I can focus on, because that might be a way to get people to at least be open to the idea of what we're talking about from
Because
their own angle.
right, people just take things so seriously. And the biggest thing, especially when I'm working with archangels and bringing in channeling information through guides and things like that, is they tell you, stop taking things so seriously.
Oh
Because
yeah,
it
yeah.
is not as serious as you make it out to be. But our human side has to rationalize and make sense of everything and put things into little boxes, right? And it isn't, it's just, everything is just one. Everything is just,
But people are like, it can't be a simulation. I've got all these ways of making sense of it, and there's this thing, and there's that thing, and there's that thing, and it's comforting to have these categories. It's logical, right? We must be logical, otherwise it's chaos. So,
but is it?
Yeah, exactly. It's
But how do you know? Have you ever experienced it any other way?
exactly. So
Yeah,
it's what happens when we get too stuck in the left brain way of thinking about things.
exactly. The
And we've
masculine.
got to
Yeah.
have that unison of both.
hmm
Actually, you reminded me of something. I remembered that something I've noticed is that a number of times in the past, I came across someone who was telling me, oh, okay, reality is a simulation, or things like that. I came across people saying that, and I'm just like, no, can't be true, can't be true. Right. And I come across these different people, and so many years later that I reflect on, I'm like, they were giving me hints, like there was a purpose beyond what they even knew, where like the
Sometimes
collective unconscious or something was telling.
yeah, I don't like when I do weekly readings in my group, right? And for about 20 good minutes, I have no idea what I'm saying. I'm not even present anymore. It's not even me speaking, right? Like I'm talking here to you, but the information that's coming through is so much more. Either it's my higher self or somebody else that I'm channeling or another entity. But
Do you not
that's
know?
the thing. I don't. Half the time I don't. As
It
long as
might.
I
Oh, is it from the Akashic records, perhaps?
that's another place that I do access information too. Yeah,
You could ask your higher self who it is or what it
I
is.
do. But to me, it doesn't matter.
Okay.
As long as the highest of good is coming out, as long as the messages that need to be heard are heard and the healing that occurs happens, then that's all that matters. It doesn't matter where it's coming from. If it's coming for a higher purpose, that's all that matters to me.
And absolutely that it is, because it's helping people, right?
Absolutely. I see that time and time again. I have this one client, she came to see me at a time where she wasn't too sure about where her relationship was going with her husband. And I could feel that her throat was really locked up, that she needed to speak her truth. She needed to tell her story. She needed to say her truth. And I mentioned that to her and I said, look, there's something you're holding back. There's something inside of you that needs to be released. And she's like, I've been wanting to leave my husband for a long time. And she just didn't know how to do it. And what ended up happening was that there was a mutual breaking. They had a divorce and it was very like they were both at the same place, right? They were both not happy in the way things are going. And now it's but a year later and they're both thriving. They're doing really well. They co-parent their son, but that's the thing is that until she was able to acknowledge that part of herself that she was holding back, she was never going to be able to move ahead. She was always going to be stuck. Right. And that's just one example. But
Right.
It's a releasing, it's acknowledging, it's a letting go, it's a forgiving and moving on. And now she's reading tarot cards and making a killing and doing
Wow.
amazing things and doing things that her soul has been crying out for. And now she can express it in a very genuine way.
Yeah. Because otherwise people they either they just feel miserable that they're not doing it, or they find an unhealthy way to do it. Right.
Right. Yeah, that's right.
So you mentioned her throat. So is that her throat chakra?
Yes, correct.
Could you tell us more about chakras?
Well, the way I see them is they're just energy vortexes within our bodies. So they are places where they can get dirty and muddy, and how that happens is the energies that are carrying in our bodies, right? So we have our root chakra, which is at the base of our spine. That connects us to the earth, that connects us to security, to protection, to, just to that place of safety and comfort. And then you move up, you have the the sacral, which is right below your navel. This is where your pleasures, your enjoyment of life, and this is where you allow these things to come in. And this is where a lot of manifestations happen as well, when you're bringing the energy down. So when you move up into your solar plexus, this is your willpower. This is just at the bottom of your rib cage, right? So the solar plexus is where it can be either one or the other. Your willpower, either you're scared to make a move, or you are pushing ahead. Or if you're completely balanced, then you're standing in your power and you know who you are and you know what you serve and you know what you do, right? Your heart, of course, is in the middle of your chest. This is for your unconditional love. This, I find, is blocked for a lot of people. And
Right.
the thing is about the energy, how it flows, it flows from the back to the front. So if you're closed off, you're not receiving love. You may be giving it, but you're pouring from an empty cup, right? So this is where you need to really open up and
Not loving
allow yourself,
yourself.
not loving yourself, right? That's a
Right.
big thing. Of course, you have your throat chakra, speak your truth, connect with your message, connect with who you are, right? Your third eye, this is your intuitive self. This is where you can connect with foresight, and infinite knowledge, right? So then you have your crown chakra. So your crown chakra is on the top of your head. These are just the 7 basic ones. We
Right.
now have new chakras that are opening up in our ears, in our palms, and above us, below us.
How many does that add up to then?
Oh, I
I've
don't
heard
even
there's
know a number.
12, but you seem to be suggesting there's even more.
There is many more.
So are these new because of where we're at in the
Yes.
cycles?
So you know how scientists say that our DNA is filled with junk, that
Right.
there's only a couple strands that are, active, and those are now turning on. We have 12 strands that could potentially turn on. And when you are turning on those strands of DNA, those parts of you are unlocking. And they're
Okay.
right.
So is
So
that the light that's coming down
it
from the
is.
center of the
Yeah.
galaxy?
Yeah.
That's what it's doing.
It's activating that part of you. So some people, that's the thing, is that not everybody is going to experience this. It's only because they want to. They're asking for it. You have to, it's again, free will. It's a thing that if you want, you can, work with your guides, work with somebody that can help you do that, but you can activate that part of you. And that's what back in Atlantis in Lemuria times, where they had all 12 strands active at that time, which is why they could have telepathy, telekinesis, all these things. How do you think the pyramids were built? Through telekinesis. They moved those big rocks.
If you remember it,
I remember parts.
This is a good opportunity, perhaps, like talk about it. So I've read a bit. I've read the Emerald Tablets of Thoth the Atlantean, and I honestly I found it fascinating. But could you give a bit more context for those who might be listening to some of? But I've done a couple of readings from the first 2 tablets of it. So
Okay.
if anyone's listening to that, like you can give it more context.
Well, they just were able to harness the energy of the earth. They were very one with the earth and with crystals.
Were they genetically human?
Yeah, they were human.
Completely.
Absolutely. Their physical body, they were already in the fifth dimension though.
Were
That's the
there
thing.
other humans who weren't as developed as them?
Absolutely. The civilization of Atlantis was one continent.
Okay.
Then they had the rest of the world, right?
So there's
There,
Atlantis, Nigeria. Where does
well,
Mu
Lemuria
fit into this?
was the first, like the old school kind of old ways, right? They
Right.
were the like the how do the Buddhist monks, I guess, or
Right. Yeah.
like they were the old school ways, and then Atlantis developed because it was the younger generation wanting to do things their own way.
Right.
So they moved away from the traditions, they moved away from the cultures, and they kind of in then developed it on their own the way they wanted to.
I've heard there's another continent or something called Mu or something that was this other civilization.
I don't know.
You don't know about that one. Okay.
No,
So to clarify, what did they came from another planet, right?
everyone did. All of us did.
So if I remember, there's there was Mars and civilization there, and there was a civilization. No, I don't remember from past life. No, I
This is
remember
just
from my
information that you've
research.
read. Yeah.
Yeah, and then there's some from Maldek, which is now the asteroid belt. Do you know anything
Mhm.
about that?
Not that I've worked with in this lifetime, no.
Okay, you just focus on what you remember from
hmm
Atlantis.
Yeah, and basically pulling forth the teachings because what it's interesting because they had a school system for children where they would incorporate learning your psychic abilities as you develop, as you grow cognitively from ages 0 to 7 to then 7 to 14, right? So they had a template. They would have little pictures and show children how to start using those muscles and training them, right? And this is the information that I want to access. Now, this is something you would never physically find. It is not on the physical plane. It is on another dimension. So these are psychic tablets that you can access, and that is something that I just came into not too long ago. I had flashes of the tablets of what they used to teach children, and then I realized I'm like, I need to bring this information forth.
That
So
sounds great.
it is. That's something that I'm now going to start incorporating in my own children, and yeah, and see where that goes. That's something that's almost like a passion. I can feel that's the next step for me, right? Because
For us.
we do everything. For us, everyone, yeah, absolutely. But for me in particular, I need to remember how, and that's the thing, when I started doing Reiki, um, I naturally added crystals into my healings. And from my meditations that I've done and astral projections that I've had, I actually found out that there is a temple of healing that Atlantis had for the elites. That you go into this room, onto this table, and it's filled with all these beautiful, vibrant crystals, and they were all lit up. And that's how they healed the physical body from all the mental, emotional, and physical pain
They
that
use
people
pyramids.
experience. They had pyramids. It's nothing, they weren't like the ones in Egypt. They're more like temples and homes, right? Like when I can remember walking down a hallway and they didn't use lights like light bulbs. They used crystals. They turned these crystals on, and that was the light in the walls.
Oh, there is a civilization in a novel I read that did that.
Mhm.
And
That
I'm
was
going to suggest this to the audience. I've been thinking about doing this for a while. And because honestly, this guy seems to know about, the author seemed to know about this. I think Stephen Lawhead, I think. And it was this book called Empyrean.
okay.
And yeah, there's a civilization in it. And what they actually had lights that are crystals. And
Mhm.
honestly, it's a really interesting read in it.
I
It fits
honestly
in with
think
this awakening sort of themes.
I think that's what we need to get back to, because that is earth. Like
Yeah.
that was not hurting the earth, that was using the earth's energy and the power within it. Like there's vortexes. We all know about these vortexes. There's one at Sedona, there's one at Stonehenge, right?
Are
And
they
the pyramids,
Earth? Are
obviously.
they Earth chakras?
They sorry?
Are they Gaia's chakras?
Yes, they are a part of the chakras. Yes.
Right. And
There's
we haven't
a
been
lot of
treating her very
energy
well.
vortex. No. So that's why, and the Earth's grid system as well, the energy grid system, there was many, many years ago, when Atlantis went down, and there was, people call them reptilians. They were the ones who moved different crystals, different things in the grid system to
They
turn it
messed
off.
up the grid.
They
I
did.
heard I read there's something about the grid was hijacked to mess with us in a
Yeah.
negative
Because
energy.
that's how we accessed information. That's how we could be telepathic. That's how we are able to get information. But now that's why we're having such a hard time with it, because the Earth's grid system, there's people I know, I've met myself personally, who are actually working on repairing the Earth's grid system right now. And I've heard right now they're about 56% back. We had it at 2% not that long, about 10 years ago. It was at 2%, the grid system.
I would like to interview someone like that.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
you can contact me with them.
Yeah, that's something I could probably set up for you for sure. But yeah, that's just it. That's the most amazing thing, is that at the time of Lemuria and Atlantis, they had this in place, right? Everything was functioning, everything was working, and that's why they were able to do what they did. And they were at a higher level of civilization than we were, even now,
Okay,
of
so
technology and science and everything.
okay, so there was, after that, the fall,
Mhm.
there was, going back to the Stone Age, basically, right?
Almost. Yeah.
Right.
There was,
And where did the Neanderthals fit into this?
these are beings that were already in the earth, like they were almost developed. I guess I'm not sure exactly where Neanderthals come from, but they were original beings here on earth, and they don't have the same kind of intergalactic, I guess you could say, DNA that we have, right? They're made a little bit differently. They don't have the same kind of strands of crystalline energy that we do. I have the
All right,
sun coming.
that's fine. That's
Mhm.
interesting, because I've actually wondered about that, because there's an area where the history we've been taught does actually
Mhm.
overlap in some ways with the real history.
Yeah.
Because obviously the history we were taught is that we just evolved out of Africa, and then we went out, and then we went to Europe where we encountered Neanderthals, and
Well, we've
yeah,
talked about everything else but aliens. And I have to
let's
tell
do it.
you,
Let's do it.
let's go there, because how do you think we have advanced our own mental and emotional and well-being? How do you
First
think
of
we
all,
upgrade?
I think that either the evolution was guided so that would come about, or we were just outright designed with like the genetic templates, partly of other aliens and partly maybe from Cro-Magnon, and
We're
combined
all
together.
everything. We are all one within that. See, we have
Oh yeah,
Palladian
obviously we're all
DNA,
one.
and but I'm just saying, from humans, we evolved because of people coming down and teaching us these things. They taught us how to do agriculture, right? And farming and growing and things like that. These are things that were never figured out by
Okay.
humans. These are things that were brought to us and told and taught.
I do think we have the capability to learn it ourselves, but I think they helped us learn it.
They did, because we weren't doing it fast enough.
Right. So my impression, I've got this intuitive idea that, or maybe I did read it, I'm not sure. This idea that there's this great experiment, that there's this agreement
Mhm.
among a variety of species to do this experiment on Earth. And if I understand, it was around the time that the Orion Wars ended. So is it related to a treaty at the end of the Orion Wars, maybe?
For us upgrading our DNA, you mean, or
No, like maybe
evolving?
the genes of the whole different alien species being a one species on Earth, and souls can
Mhm.
come from different places with star seeds. That this is like, well, some people say it's a prison planet. I think that's a bit pessimistic. It's more like kind of
Well,
kindergarten sort of
life is what
trainings.
you make it, right?
Yeah.
That's what it comes down to. right? So all of these things happened in the past to bring us to where we are now. And now it's our job, I guess you could say, to choose something different and to choose to do it in a better way and to find that way out ourselves.
Right. So which of the most interesting, do you want to talk about more about aliens then? So what are your favorite alien species?
I connect with the Palladians. I find
Are they
it's
the Nordic
interesting.
ones?
They are, yeah. And I actually, interestingly enough, in my past life regression that I did last week, I came into a lifetime where I was a gray. I looked down because
You mean
in
Zetas?
the gray aliens, right?
Yeah.
The big heads and the big eyes. So I in the past life regression, he asked me, okay, what are you wearing? What do you look like? You know, and I looked down and I was in a ship. And I look and I have these long, skinny, gray, silverly arms and these weird shaped fingers. And all I remember is that I had a purpose. I was here I needed to help grow and plant the earth to get it going for life. And
Okay. So, I mean, people have negative perceptions of them, but is it a variety of,
they're the
do they
planters.
vary?
They're the ones that keep care of our trees and our ecosystem.
Okay. So there are some that are
They're very
negative.
loving and gentle.
They are.
Because that's fear. Those perceptions are fear-based.
Okay. So which are the
and
negative
fear-driven.
ones?
There really isn't. Everyone has positive and everyone has negative within them, right? So it's whatever you choose to embrace more.
Are there purely negative polarity species though?
No.
Really?
Everyone has a positive and negative within them. Yes, there's the dark and the light. That's just how it is. It's just most of them. Well, it's just
they vary though, civilization wise.
Absolutely. Yeah, just as
right. They vary on a civilizational basis rather than on an individual basis.
Mm-hmm.
But they vary individually as well. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So even some of the negative ones are a catalyst for us potentially.
It's there for your learning, is there for your growth, right? And it's there for them too. That's the thing. They're learning and they're evolving and growing just as much as we are. They can see things from a higher perspective than us because they've been in their physical bodies for a lot longer. They get to choose how long they live in their bodies. They don't just die off. So, I mean, that's the thing with Earth. We chose this life. So we, contracted ourselves to this 100 some odd years, right? 80 to 100, if you're lucky.
Okay. So they're quite intelligent. So what's their civilization like, the Greys?
They're very they live on their ships, right? But the thing is that they oversee Earth and help with the ecosystems and also help with the DNA upgrades as well. So there's many reports. I'm sure you've heard of, crop circles and things like that. They're not responsible for the crop circles. The crop circles are energy vortexes within the earth, letting go of energy, right? And they're like puzzle pieces for us to find. But the Greys,
Gaia's doing it then.
Gaia's doing it, yeah.
Oh wow, I like that. Oh, she's lovely, isn't she?
Right? Because she's trying to give us the keys, the puzzle pieces.
So we need to look at these and see what the pattern is of all of them. If
yeah, put it all together and see what kind of puzzle you make.
That sounds really interesting.
Right? Isn't that fun? Dolores Cannon, you can learn a lot about all of this stuff through her. I don't know if she ever listened to her work. Yeah. She definitely helped me expand my mind, and listening to her books, that's what triggered those shadow parts of me that I didn't know I had. And once I was able to remember those lifetimes, those things that I went through, it unlocked so much for me in this lifetime. And I feel I wouldn't be where I am now if it wasn't for her.
Okay, so about other aliens, what about the Arcturians then?
I'm not too sure about them. I don't do anything in this lifetime. I maybe at one point I was
Okay.
involved with
Any
them,
others
but
you'd like to tell us about?
I mainly know more about the Greys and the Pleiadians.
Okay, so more
So
about the
yeah.
Palladians then.
Well, they are the ones that kind of like watching over and fighting the good fight, you could say. And they're the ones that are holding the light and helping Earth go to that next level.
Yeah, that's what I've heard as well. And
Hmm.
it's not that, my impression is that we look like them more than the other way around.
What do you think our DNA is
Exactly.
comprised of? Right? Yeah.
Right. So do they have more of a connection with the Norse? Did they visit the Norse more?
Perhaps. That I don't know. Yeah.
Speculative. Yeah. Yeah. But it must
Yeah.
be. It must have been funny. I've heard about around just after the end of World War II sort of time, like the and people in the U.S. military and intelligence actually came across aliens, right? And some of them were Nordics, so they come across these blonde women, aliens. I'm like, wait, really? Are you sure they're not from Sweden? Like,
Maybe they were.
no,
What do
no,
you think the colonization? Well, that could be
no. I'm
Sweden.
just
That could
imagining
be.
they were thinking that at the time, like,
Yeah, maybe.
yeah,
I know we've touched on a lot of different topics for sure today. It's made it for a really great listen, that's for sure.
yeah, yeah. So, well, we haven't really we could go more into the law of attraction about how it works, like
Mhm.
on a practical basis.
Well, it's the law of attraction is based on like attracts like, right? So like vibration attracts like vibration. It's what you're giving out is what you're getting back. So if you don't like your external environment, if you don't like what's happening around you, you got to take a look inside and see where are you vibrating at? What kind of emotions are creating these feelings in order to project this into your external environment, right? So, knowing that, just understanding that you are creating everything around you means that you can uncreate it just the same. And then you can create whatever else that you do want, right?
Right, but to uncreate it, you can't just think it. Your frequency needs to rise, right?
Right. Right. You have to, that is where you're at. Like you realize that you're at a lower frequency. So you can't just jump to the highest frequency. You have to do it in little steps, little 1 degree at a time. So there's Abraham Hicks actually has the emotional scale where, oh, you know what? I just want to pull it out because that is a really great example right now where you're at one place in your life or you're feeling one emotion. And let's say it's, you're in this pit of despair. I'm just pulling it up here. So you're at the very bottom of this list. So at the top, of course, you have joy, appreciation, love, freedom, things like that, right? But a lot of people live in this lower pit of fear based thinking, right? And
Right.
don't even realize it because, again, it's just what they were taught. So that's what they continue to do until they start questioning it. And so when you're in this place, all you have to do is reach for the next highest emotion. So look at jealousy, or what a part of you is jealous of that situation or that person, right? Or look at if you can move from jealousy to hatred.
Are you just at one level, or are you kind of like
These
at a
are
range
all
and your range increases?
these are ranging up. So you are
Right,
going from wherever you are, wherever you can identify yourself at, right?
right,
You can get in from overwhelm to frustration is actually a step up because with overwhelm, it's kind of scattered. Frustration, you have the drive to want to do something about it. When you're in overwhelm, you're afraid to make a move. You don't know what to do. You're overwhelmed. When you're frustrated, that part of that anger part of you has that drive, and you're like, no, I'm going to do something about this. I can't stand this
oh,
anymore.
it's not
Right?
passive. It's
No.
more combative, right? But how do
Frustration
you
is,
get
right?
right? So how do you get beyond the fight or flight? Because I've heard that there's a cycle where people go fight, flight, and then they
That's a habit.
passiveness, and then they
You
just.
have to acknowledge within yourself first. You have to
I heard that
be true
acceptance
with
is the
yourself.
key.
Exactly. That's just it. As soon
Right.
as you can accept where you are, then you basically you let go of the coal. You let it down. You're like, okay, so then you can move on and you can pick up the diamond instead.
Yeah. So what's the next step up from frustration?
Pessimism,
Right.
boredom, you know.
Right.
That's it. It sounds like it's not a step up, but it is because you're letting go of the really powerful potentness of the frustration. And pessimism. You're like, whatever. I'm just gonna let this go, or you're gonna let this be, right?
I'm seeing a
But you're
pattern where
letting
there's an
go.
active to passive, but it's a different type of
Mhm.
active, different type of passive every time.
Right. And then you get into places like contentment or satisfaction. You're like, okay, I can handle this. I'm okay with this. This is a place that I can deal with. Right. And then you move into hopefulness, like, okay, so maybe I have learned something from this. Maybe I can go move forward from this. Right. You get into that hopeful place and then you get optimistic. You're like, you know what? Things are changing for me. Things are moving in the right direction. And I made that happen. You get into that place and then
Yeah.
you get you get that enthusiasm, the passion, and that's where you can thrive. Just getting into those places, and you can do it within a couple moments. It's just realizing the feelings that you're having when you're
Right.
feeling them.
And from
Mhm.
there we can get to love.
Yeah, which is the ultimate goal.
But of
And
course,
that's what we're
beyond
moving
love,
into.
there's other levels, but we won't need to.
Well, but in our 3D body, we can't embody very much higher levels than that just yet.
Yeah, it's hard to
We're
just
getting there.
embody unity. And for now, we don't need to rush. We don't need to rush ahead of.
No, we just get
Yeah.
to experience what we're experiencing now. Yeah.
And it's a pretty interesting time to live. This time of
Mhm.
change, this age of Aquarius. You know,
Yeah, we're
so I think
going into the
maybe,
golden age.
yeah. So perhaps with that optimistic note, let's leave it at this. It was a really, really interesting conversation.
Mhm.
And I'd be I'd be happy to have you on again sometime.
Well, I would love to be back on. I had a lot of fun talking to you. I honestly, um, I don't usually go this far with my conversations, but I can see in you that this is something that you are hunger for. You're hungry
Yeah,
for. I
yeah,
can
I'm
see
really
that.
curious.
Yeah, so I'm happy to help in any way I can. Absolutely.
All right, well, thanks a lot. And well, thank you, listener, for listening then. Goodbye.
Thank you so much.